Got a sunburn to peel the daggers off your tongue. Young and dumb, I'm rotting like a bed sore in a cold case that's never gonna be more than scratching at the walls while you're waiting for a bullet to come. All along I've been treading in the deep end, throw my mirror in the cupboard for the weekend. Try and put together pieces while I'm dreaming, but nothing's adding up to a thing but a hole in the head.
An opportunity here to provide leadership, support, and a voice to the voiceless. The sacrifices that we made during our service do not end here. We carry on. We push forward, and we give hope and inspiration through love, community, and support. Stay free.
Rights and freedoms in this country are absolutely everything to me, because I personally know the sacrifice required in order to get them back once they're gone. So when my brothers and sisters call Stand 2, be sure I'll be there.
Legacy media will play their games, right? Like, this isn't about this or that. This is about freedom, period.
The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Brothers and sisters in uniform, whether you're a police officer, military, check your hearts. Look where we're going. Man, wake up. I beg you.
If the veterans can't stand up and get a message across to the government, I don't know who can. I don't know. But we're going to give it our best shot. And I think we have a chance to win this and do it. But we need your help. And we need you to come, and we need you to stand too. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk again soon.
Woke pirates, yes, they robbed, sold out to the merchant ships. Minutes after they took out, from the bottomless pit. My head was made strong by the hand of the Almighty. We forward in this generation triumphantly. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Oh, have no fear for atomic energy, 'cause none of them can stop the time. How long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. Got to fulfill the book. Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs. It's all I ever have. Redemption songs, redemption songs, redemption songs.
Hey, what's up, troops? Jeff Eve Lee, the magnanimous Gen Xer male, back with you now on this 19th day of March, 2023. Got a great show lined up today. I have with us Dr. William Makis. Actually, I'm just waiting for William to join us in studio here. I sent him a text to make sure he's all on track, but he might be running a little bit behind. That's okay. We'll go ahead and power through. Probably wouldn't be the first time that, I had somebody stand me up. Not that he's intending to do that, I'm sure. He's a doctor after all, so he's a very busy guy. But I'm just going to go ahead and do the usual here while we wait for William to join us. Hopefully everything's good to go on his end. Okay, we got Stacy, first one on the board, says, good morning. Good morning to you. It's afternoon where I am, but good morning. And Evelyn says, hello, all. Hey, what's up, Evelyn? And Darlene says, hello, everyone. I hope you're having an awesome day. Tuning in from New Brunswick. Triple Hearts. Share. Yes, please. Share this sucker far and wide. And thanks for always being with us, Darlene. Holly says, good morning from Winnipeg. Good morning to you. Cindy, our most faithful of all watchers, says, good afternoon, Jeff Hearts. Good day, friends. Giving us the smiley face and a hashtag winning. Yeah, I'm enjoying that hashtag, and Daisy was doing a really good job putting that out there yesterday. We are seeing the wins starting to pile up here in 2024, guys. So the tide, I think, is turning overall. We'll probably suffer a couple of setbacks here and there, but overall, I think the tide is definitely turning. Muriel is saying, good morning from Alberta. Good morning to you. Susan is here, says, hey, Jeff and gang. And today is the day to start filing charges. Yeah, sounds about right. And there is that is something that's going on out there. There's a lot of people are going to be trying to file some charges too. More power to them. And Stephen says he's in the house. Stephen Rogers is in the house. Okay, right on. Thanks for being with us, Stephen. And Archie says, hold them accountable. Today is the day. Right on. Over on Rumble, let's see. We got Slabtown Gal says, good afternoon, giving us the triple slashy. Right back at you. Jen Mac 82 says, good morning, gives us the triple slashy. Good morning to you. And Shiloh is with us saying, good morning, Sergeant Major. Thanks for being with us, Shiloh. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and dive into this. Come on, William. I hope you show up. But anyway, if he doesn't, I won't take it personally. Here is our philosophy quote for the day. And this is Ayn Rand. She was a Russian defector to the United States who I think made a pretty significant contribution to philosophy, especially for 20th century philosophy. And her magnum opus is Atlas Shrugged. Going galt is one of the expressions that we get from that, as in, all of the productive people just kind of running off and doing their own thing and leaving everybody else to kind of starve. Once they are so utterly disincentivized by an odious regime that just insists that they must do more for less. And they eventually end up founding Galt's Gulch, where, they like invent new technologies and they've got a higher standard of living than they've ever had. And everything else outside of Galt's Gulch is basically falling apart. I think she did some. It's a wonderful kind of endorsement of capitalism and free markets. Anyway, she says, there is no difference between communism and socialism except in the means of achieving the same ultimate end. Communism proposes to enslave men by force, socialism by vote. It is merely the difference between murder and suicide. Very well said, as always. And she was like a really great writer. The fiction that she wrote, I think, is some of the only fiction that I've ever enjoyed. She very rich characters, really verbose work. That Atlas Shrugged, it's massive. It's a really good read. And she's done like nonfiction stuff as well. Like The Virtue of Selfishness is one of my favorites. So excellent stuff. And this, I think, is it reminds me of another quote by Friedrich Hayek, who, he wrote The Constitution of Liberty and Road to Serfdom. And he pointed out in The Road to Serfdom that the only means through which we've ever seen modern liberal democracies fall to tyranny was through socialist democracy, as in Nazism in Germany and fascism in Italy. So those were tyrannies that came into being through the vote, actually. And those are the only times that we've ever really seen liberal democracies fall to tyranny in that way, when both of them being social democracies. Okay, here is our meme for the day. And we have a wolf standing at the podium, and he is speaking to his flock of sheep. And he says, after I am elected, I will become a vegetarian. That's about, this is the thing. What I was thinking when I was saying this is, it's like, everybody used to realize this. Once upon a time, it used to be like, politicians are scumbags and they're going to say whatever they got to say to further their own careers, to get elected, to cover their asses, this kind of thing. But throughout the pandemic, it was just like, oh my God, how dare you question the politicians as they run around, every one of them parroting the same narrative about safe and effective and so on and so forth. There was this total flipperoo, it's like people's minds just switched over into the authoritarian mode as soon as the fear kicked in. And now it was shame on you for questioning the politicians. Okay. I still don't have William with us. I shot him a text there, but I'll go ahead and talk about a couple other things while we are waiting. Let's see what we got up here. Now, I have some of William's articles. I'll let you guys know. I'll steer you on to him first of all. So, this is Dr. William Makis, MD, on Substack. I have it up in the ticker there if you guys want to go check him out. He has been absolutely prolific in all of this. I mean, just the volume of work that he's done is pretty incredible on his Substack here. I follow him on Twitter, and I mean, I basically had to turn my notifications off for him on Twitter because he was just flooding my feed constantly. And I mean, that's not a criticism either. It's just an incredible amount of work that he does. He's been tracking the deaths, like died suddenly. Has been, his whole kind of raison d'etre and all this stuff, like because he's an oncologist out in Alberta there, and he got hip to the whole turbo cancer thing very early on, and he's been publishing nonstop on that. So go ahead and check him out on his Substack, and he's on everything. He's tracking all this different stuff. It's not just like the side effects and the impacts on human health, but it's also like some of the political components of it. He's not just tracking the oncology stuff, but now there's all this stuff about them putting mRNA in the food supply. So he's been doing incredible work over there. And Susan is here saying Dr. Makis is a Canadian hero. Yeah, I tend to agree. I saw him speak at the International Crisis Summit there not too long ago. About a month ago, we were down in Washington, and that was for CPAC, but co-located in the same hotel with CPAC, who's the International Crisis Summit. And he gave an excellent presentation there. I thought it was fabulous. And, the one really inspirational thing that I heard him say, one thing that I thought was very impactful and probably more so than a lot of the other speakers was he said, I don't care what any judge says. I don't care what any lawyer says. All of this was illegal. All of it was coerced. It was against the law. It doesn't matter what they say. I can't remember exactly how he said it, but it was quite powerful. And I thought, like, wow, that's a pretty brave statement, especially coming from a doctor. Because doctors tend to be quite nerdy and meek, and maybe that's part of the problem that we've had in all of this is a lot of the people who should be speaking out just haven't. They haven't marshaled their courage. But this guy has been incredible throughout all of this. And Mother of the Drummers is with us on YouTube. Says, "Oh boy, I'm really late. 20 finger push-ups for me." And she's giving me the wave. Hey, Jeff. Yeah, all right. You drop and give me 20 finger push-ups there, Mother of the Drummers. But thanks for being with us. Okay, so here's another good one that William has done here. This is again on his Substack, and it says COVID-19 vaccine uptake by UK healthcare workers. So this is just within the population of healthcare workers and just within the United Kingdom. But when you look at this is something that he's been pointing to as well in other jurisdictions such as Canada. But when you look at the uptake for the different doses here, dose 1 is about 91.2%, dose 2 88.5%. Booster, 68.1%. So that's down pretty significantly. Just from like the first and second are pretty consistent. The second one is down just a little bit, but then we go from 88 to 68 for the booster. And now for the second booster, it's down to 42%. So that's another prolific drop of about 26%. Whereas we saw a drop of 20% between the second dose and the booster. Now it's down another 26%, and then that drops down from 42.1 to 30.6% in whatever booster that is, the third booster. And what are we up to now? It's like the 9th shot or something like that in Canada. And the uptake has been dropping off the entire time, but they're still pushing this stuff. And it seems to be that the new tactic is they're calling it a seasonal virus, right? So you would take it the same way that you used to take your flu vaccine. You just go back annually, and that really flies in the face of everything that they've been saying this entire time. Where you're supposed to get your initial dose, and then you go back a few weeks later for your booster because you really need that in order for it to take hold in the immune system. Well, they're not talking about any boosters anymore. It's just like a seasonal shot. So is that going to be effective? Have they changed the formulation somehow? I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's all about money, of course. That's what we're going to see now. Is they're going to be pushing it like that. Okay, I have some other stuff lined up for William here. I think I'll just give him a few minutes to see if he shows up or not, and maybe I'll just chat about some other stuff, kind of keep this thing going while we wait. So apologies to everybody, but sometimes this is just the way it is when you're doing live streams in particular. And here is we're talking about hashtag winning, and I think this is kind of like a win. Maybe we're breaking even, but here is CTV News, and title is Former Olympian Caitlyn Jenner backs New York County's ban on transgender female athletes. Okay, so is she a homophobe? Is her, or whatever they call it, a transphobe? Is she a transphobe for that? Is this transphobia for Caitlyn Jenner to come out and back this ban on transgender female athletes? It's going to be, I think they're going to have a really hard time slapping that label on this person here. And really, I mean, Caitlyn Jenner, Bruce Jenner, whatever. I'm not even really convinced that he or she is genuinely gender dysphoric or transgender or whatever. I think he probably just did that so he wouldn't go to jail for that hit and run where he killed somebody while he was texting and driving. And then they're like, oh, well, that's a really serious offense there. And he's like, well, I'm transgender. They're like, oh, okay, carry on. So I'm pretty sure that's what's going on there. But anyway, this is a pretty powerful voice in this particular battle space here. All right, I'll read a little bit from the article. It says former Olympic gold medalist Caitlyn Jenner on Monday said she supported a local New York official's order banning female sports teams with transgender athletes from using county-owned facilities. The ban applies to over 100 athletic facilities in New York City's Long Island suburbs. Speaking alongside Nassau County Executive Buck Blakeman at his office in Mineola, Jenner said allowing transgender athletes like herself to compete against other women will ruin women's sports for years to come. Yeah, that's kind of what we're all saying, isn't it? Quote, let's stop it now while we can, she said the reality television star who came out as transgender woman in 2015. The LGBT Network, a Long Island-based advocacy group, called Jenner's comments a, quote, baffling contradiction, close quote, to her own identity as a transgender woman that is, quote, not only hypocritical but also harmful, close quote, to the LGBTQ plus community. Oh, I missed the S in there, so I guess I'm a transphobe. It's okay. Quote, it is disheartening to witness someone who has experienced the challenges of being marginalized actively contribute to the oppression of others within the same community, close quote. David Kilnick, the group's president, said in a statement, quote, such actions only serve to amplify the voices of intolerance and detract from the collective efforts toward a more inclusive society, close quote. Yeah, I mean, this is the same kind of branding that they've been putting on this the entire time. It's the exact same narrative, but the thing is that life isn't fair. We try to make it fair to the greatest extent that we are able. But really, like, you're never going to achieve perfect fairness. So for everybody, somebody's always going to get a little bit of the shaft. The real objective is to go for the most fair option available. And this is not it. Of course, it's absolutely wide open to abuse, especially from male athletes who suck at what they do, to just go and compete in the female league, and then all of a sudden they'll be world-class athletes, right? So there's a lot of that going on, of course, and it's just abusive and awful what they're doing to young women and girls. Okay, back to the article. Blakeman, a Republican elected in 2022, issued an executive order in February requiring any teams, leagues, or organizations seeking a permit from the county's Parks and Recreation Department to expressly designate whether they are male, female, or co-ed athletes. Any teams designated as quote-unquote female would be denied permits if they allow transgender athletes to participate. The ban doesn't apply to men's teams with transgender athletes. It covers all Nassau County-owned facilities, including ball fields, basketball and tennis courts, swimming pools, and ice rinks. Jenner, 74, competed against men when she won the Olympic gold medal in the decathlon in 1976. Now, she would have been a man at that time, and there was never any talk of transgenderism. That wasn't a thing in 1976. But hey, such is the doublespeak of CTV. Oh, hey, you know what I forgot to mention? Sorry, I was just kind of juggling things before I came in to do this. I was looking for William there. But I got a new pin on my hat, in case nobody noticed. I got this new pin from Alex Prudhomme, who is one of the OGs from the monument when we all showed up there during the trucker convoy in Ottawa, and he got this. He got these pins made. It's pretty excellent for all of the OGs, all the veterans who showed up for the trucker convoy. So that's my new pin, in case anybody was wondering. That's right there. Thanks, Alex. It's pretty spectacular, actually. It's an awesome pin. Okay, so back to this. Jenner, 74, competed against men. Okay, I covered that. Decathlon. She said she has quote unquote sympathy for LGBTQ2S plus people and quote understands their struggles, close quote, but argued that allowing transgender people to compete with women would undermine gains female athletes achieved under Title IX, a law banning sex discrimination in programs that receive federal funds. Yeah, Title IX has been a real problem too for athletes in the US. This is something that I've been tracking for a number of years. And somewhere around the early 2010s there, they started to argue for the gender parity, which is what always happens. Now, it's supposed to be about equal opportunity, but of course, when we're talking about equity, what they really mean is equality of outcome. And what ended up happening with the Title IX stuff was that if you didn't have the same number of male and female athletes, well, then they would just cut programs for men in order to balance that out. And it's basically resulted in the death of wrestling in a lot of colleges and universities. And wrestling was one of the original Olympic sports, right? So it's just been absolutely devastating for wrestling in particular. I think the football programs are a little bit better off because they have programs for cheerleading, which a lot of women are interested in, and that kind of balances off the number of men who are participating in the football program. But otherwise, like when it comes to wrestling, where you just don't see as many female athletes being interested, they end up, suppressing the number of men. Okay, I just got a text from William. He says, "I'm so sorry, I ran into a conflict." So I'm going to be flying by the seat of my pants here, guys. But that's okay. And I got all kinds of stuff I can cover. Don't worry about it. Okay, so Title IX. One of those things that was really well intentioned, but it turns out that it's not about the equality of opportunity anymore. It's about the equality of outcomes. So what they end up doing is they hold men back in order for women to catch up, which is not really what you should be doing. Of course, you should be helping women, not harming men. Okay. Here is back to the article. This is quote, all I'm trying to do is protect women, close quote, Jenner said Monday. Jenner, a supporter of former President Donald Trump, has been a vocal opponent of transgender athletes competing in women's sports. A New York native, she has long lived in Los Angeles area and ran successfully for California governor as a Republican in 2021. Blakeman has argued the ban is intended to both foster fair play and protect girls and women from getting injured if they play against transgender women. His executive order, however, also covers sports like swimming, gymnastics, figure skating, and track, where there is no physical contact between competitors. The executive order also takes decisions about who can play out of the hands of leagues and gives it to the government. Okay. Anyway, I think this is a win. It's nice to see that Caitlyn Jenner is coming out on our team. And, she has been for a while. Like it says there, she was a Trump supporter and stuff like that, too. So at the end of the day, I think there are some people out there, even if they're on the other side of a lot of these crazy issues, they do tend to be, when it comes right down to like basic principles, a lot of people will end up we'll end up going back to those principles. Okay. What else do I got here? So we have there's always lots going on with there was that vote there yesterday in the Commons. Now last night they voted later last night to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. And, the bill itself ended up being so watered down that it doesn't really mean anything. It's not calling for anything. It's just kind of virtue signaling for Canada. They were calling for like an embargo on on weapons and calling for a ceasefire and this kind of thing. How about calling for a surrender? That's what I'm always saying. Is it's like, this could be over tomorrow if Hamas would just surrender and give back the hostages. But the NDP were pushing this thing, and the liberals are having a really hard time sitting on this fence, I think, because they have the Islamic bloc that they're trying to appease all the time. They're going after the Muslim votes, but at the same time, they need those Jewish votes and the Jewish support as well. And of course, they don't want to be called a name like anti-Semitic. So okay, here is one of these. One thing related to that, we have there's all this talk about every time we start talking about hate crimes, everything goes to Islamophobia, right? That has been the narrative over the last little while, and that's entirely because of jihadi Icky Khalid actually winning a seat in Parliament and then pushing forward that motion M103 to condemn Islamophobia in Canada, and now that's been the buzzword. That's going to be the club that they beat us with. Anytime we want to have a discussion, a frank discussion about the doctrines of Islam, or potentially about terrorism that seems to be rather problematic. Doesn't seem to be. I mean, statistically, there's what's Gad Saad was posting some stuff about this. There's like 40 to 50,000 terrorist attacks, like Islamic terrorist attacks, just since 9/11. But if you want to talk about that, then it'll be Islamophobic. But here we have, like, when you look at the actual data, and this is very consistent with everything that I've seen over the years in terms of the data, when it comes to hate crimes, it's overwhelmingly Jews. It was like 13-1, I think, the last time I checked. It was like 13 times the number of anti-Semitic hate crimes as there were the Islamophobic hate crimes. And they started fiddling with definitions again, because that's what they do. And so now, like, certain hate crimes, because when people think of a hate crime, they think of something violent, right? But now, just like teenagers doing stupid stuff, like putting bacon on the steps of a mosque or something like that, that'll be classified as a hate crime. And to get those numbers up, and they're still not coming even close. Susan is here's got an update. She says, Susan, hey, there's a development in my story. It turns out someone who commented on a share of my video was called by the cops. I'm trying to get in touch with him for details. Really? Okay. That was something that I was just reading about this morning too. Was over in the UK, how much police resources are being dedicated to policing people's social media posts. It's full 1984, of course. But I don't know, the UK, are they worse off than us? Probably, especially when it comes to the mass immigration, I would say definitely. But they've kind of turned a corner, at least on the biomedical transitions for minors as of late. So they're not doing that anymore. Whereas we in the United States and Canada, we are just forging ahead, even though all the European countries have banned it. But yeah, the police in the UK are spending an inordinate amount of time looking at people's social media posts. It's just galling. Okay. Here's the article from City News. Majority of surging hate crimes in Toronto are anti-Semitic. Police chief. Yes, this is what the data has indicated for years. Citing the crisis in the Middle East as an ongoing factor, Toronto Police Chief Myron Demkew said the city continues to see disturbing surges in hate crime calls, with the majority being anti-Semitic in nature. And this is something, like, we also saw this, since October 7th, we've been seeing, like, it's synagogues that are getting shot at, right? It's synagogues that are getting shot at. It's Jewish businesses that are being targeted. Nobody's going out there and targeting any Muslim businesses. Nobody's shooting up the mosques. It all seems to be going one way. Chief Demkew provided an update Monday on hate crime and vehicle theft statistics, saying that both are on the rise and remain a focus for Toronto police. It's been 163 days since the Middle East crisis began, and the impact of the geopolitical unrest abroad continues to affect people worldwide, including in Canada and right here in Toronto, close quote, Demkew said in a release. Quote, "We are laser focused on the task at hand, keeping the city safe," close quote. So far this year, DimQ said there have been 84 confirmed hate crimes, up 83% over last year. Most of them, 56%, have been anti-Semitic. Okay, so most of them, 56%. I'm going to say that's probably 56% of that. Geez, I don't know. So, well, 50%, yeah, 56% overall. So 56% overall have been anti-Semitic. There's a lot of groups in Canada in that one group, which is a small group, by the way. I'm not sure what the population here is here in Canada for Jews, but it's only a couple 100,000 at most. And worldwide it's 13 million. Like it's actually a really small group. So they're singled out for 56% of the hate crimes, even though there's such a small number of them. Okay, quote, last month saw the highest number of anti-Semitic occurrences in the last 3 years, DMQ grimly noted. Since October 7th, 2023, hate crimes have risen 93% a year over year, and Toronto police have attended 989 hate crime calls. Quote, while we saw a reduction in calls for service for hate crimes in December and January, we have seen a significant increase in February with 67% rise in calls, close quote, said DMQ. The second highest bias category for hate crimes in 2024 targeted 2S LGBTQI plus, oh, that's a new acronym, communities, followed by anti-Black, anti-Muslim, Arab, Palestine. So second highest is for the 2S LGBTQI plus. I mean, what constitutes a hate crime against, misgendering them? Potentially, I'm not sure what the criteria are for taking these statistics. Okay. Quote, while underreporting of all forms of hate crime is a concern, I know from talking to police in the community that Islamophobia is a significant concern. And given our statistics, I am concerned about significant underreporting in this regard, close quote, said the chief added. Maybe it's just hype. I don't think that has occurred to him here. Maybe a lot of this stuff about Islamophobia is just hype, and it's not really happening, on a level commensurate with the rhetoric around this. So, and the whole term Islamophobia, it comes out of the UN. It's from the Organization of Islamic Countries, a block of about 80 countries that vote together on all issues. That's why you've got 110 resolutions condemning Israel and 0 condemning, say, Saudi Arabia. And they came up with this term Islamophobia in a UN resolution back in 2009 that would basically put religion in the same category as protected groups of humans. So you're not allowed to criticize anymore. Back to the article. 34 vehicles stolen per day last year. The plague of vehicle thefts has dominated local news headlines, and DimQ confirms just how bad the problem is in Toronto, with startling statistics showing more than 12,000 vehicles were stolen in Toronto last year. That amounts to 34 vehicles per day, or 1 vehicle stolen every 40 minutes. Quote, we have taken 68 carjackings so far in 2024. That's a 106% increase compared to the same period last year, close quote, said DimQ. Yeah, and I mean, the fact that we're importing the world's criminals, that can't be helping this particular issue. That is for sure. And that was a communist tactic that, the commies really praised Fidel Castro for doing that. Leading up to the embargo, there was the United States that challenged him to say, okay, well, why don't you allow people to leave? Why don't you allow people who want to come to the United States to come here? And he was like, okay, I will. And the United States went over to pick up a bunch of people on the beach. And as they come to find out after getting hit with a wave of crime shortly thereafter, it was the prison population. He just emptied his prisons and sent them to the United States. So I tend to think that there's a lot of that's happening as well, especially, say, for example, coming out of Venezuela, where Maduro is no doubt driving a lot of this, and it's all part and parcel with the destabilization agenda that the world seems to be inflicting on the West. I think that China is the real center of gravity here, but the communists, global communism. Back to the article. Quote, break-in enters for auto thefts continue to rise. There have been 34 incidents so far this year compared to 22 for all of last year, close quote, he added. Toronto police recently absorbed a slew of criticism after providing what some considered questionable advice on how to safeguard against break-ins for vehicle theft. At an Etobicoke safety meeting last month, Constable Marco Riccardi advised residents to leave their key fobs in a Faraday pouch and in a convenient place for thieves as they as a way to lessen the risk of violent confrontations. Quote, to prevent the possibility of being attacked in your home, leave your fobs at the front door because they are breaking into your home to steal your car. They don't want anything else, close quote. Well, I mean, how do we know that? The story gained international attention, and Toronto police later seemed to backtrack, saying that while, quote, well-meaning, close quote, there are numerous other ways to prevent auto theft motivated home invasions. Yeah, like firearms and the right to defend yourself, castle doctrine, this kind of thing. That works as an excellent deterrent, actually. And you'll see that the United States takes a very different approach in this regard. Yeah, you're not going to get a whole lot of break and enters in some of these rural areas in Texas. That's for damn sure. Okay, let's take a look at what else do we got here. I got a bunch of stuff. Yeah, I mean, China is always a really hot topic, but let me just cue this up for you guys. Yeah, bear with me because, of course, this is one of those mornings. So hopefully, William's not going to make it, it sounds like. But that's what it's like when you do live shows. You got to be ready to go on the fly. So let me just bring this over here for you guys. Okay, this is something that we've been tracking quite a bit. Here is real Andy Lee, and she says, I'm reading emails from FAC about Ebola shipment from Winnipeg to China. I'm shocked. They don't know how to pack it. They don't know what forms to use. They don't know the shipment route. Nobody asks why China wants it. One email actually just says, quote, fingers crossed, close quote. Isn't that wonderful? How, we had Chinese spies working at the Winnipeg Level 4 Biosecurity Lab who were escorted out, frog marched out of there by the RCMP. And as it turns out, they're working hand in glove with the Chinese Communist Party, shipping them Ebola. And apparently, the gain of function research has been done using Ebola as well. And, I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of vaccines, mRNA and otherwise, coming out in the next few years that we should all buy for that. I wanted to ask William about that quite a bit because I have seen him talking. He's been very optimistic about the prospects of, say, ivermectin, for example, fights off a lot of these viruses. And also, when it comes to the turbo cancers, apparently it has a really impactful effect on those as well. So Rob was just saying Islamophobia is just a made-up term designed to discourage the open and honest debate about Islam that we desperately need in our society. I do think that we need to have some very frank conversations when it comes to the doctrines of Islam, in particular. They lend themselves to radicalism and violence much more so than comparable religions. And I know that, especially when you look at the Old Testament, it's a lot of barbarism. The Jews were stoning people to death when Jesus came on the scene, for example. They were stoning women for adultery, which is something that we see in the Islamic world quite a bit. But I've said here before, too, I think that the fact that the Jews were conquered by the Romans had a bit of a moderating effect on them, whereas the Romans were conquered by the Muslims further down the road, and it's a very new religion as well. So there's no Luther. There's never been any kind of a Reformation, and a lot of the stuff I think is lifted from. A lot of the stuff in the Quran is actually lifted from the earlier Jewish traditions. The thing is that Islam is in need of a reformation, but it's a newer religion, and it's never had any kind of like a Luther or anything like that. Okay, here's another one. This is Melissa Lanceman, and she's saying, remember when the Liberals withheld the Winnipeg lab documents from Parliament over and over again? Now we know why. Under Justin Trudeau's watch, the PRC and its entities, including the People's Liberation Army, were allowed to infiltrate Canada's top-level lab. They were able to transfer sensitive intellectual property and dangerous pathogens to the PRC. Yeah, that's exactly it. So this is the Winnipeg lab scientists who did some Ebola research with Jean Chrétien's brother back in the day. I think that was around 2015. And then in 2018, she's working at the Level 4 Biosecurity Lab. And she has this relationship with the CCP scientists back in China who are really excited about working with Q here. This is Xingu Ku is the lady's name, who was working at the level 4 the Winnipeg lab, and so they were really excited to be working with her because she was the only Chinese national who was working in a level 4 biosecurity lab anywhere. And of course, it was in Canada because we are just so commie-philic with the current regime. And so, yeah, she got busted sharing these secrets with China. She got frog marched out of there. And they tried to they had a committee that was looking into it. The committee asked for documents to be released. The government refused. They were ordered by committee 4 times and by the Speaker of the House to turn over the documents on this. And what do? They call the 2021 election. So there's a snap election. Committee gets dissolved. It's going to have to be reformed. And they're going to have to start the whole thing over again after the election. We just recently got a report declassified, and Pierre Poilievre was holding it. There was like 2,400 pages. So they finally got that, but they went to all the trouble. They defied Parliament. They defied the Speaker. They got they were held in contempt of Parliament. They called an election. Then they threw the Speaker under the bus more recently. I think that's probably what that whole setup with Rota was all about. Was it didn't have so much to do. Well, obviously Rota wasn't the one who invited Yaroslav Hunka to the Parliament. I mean, we know now that it was Justin Trudeau, and he scapegoated Hunka, and so it seems to have been a political move to get him out of the way. And perhaps that was related to the fact that he was the one who also told the government they have to turn over these documents related to this. So massive cover up on this one. Okay, so I might have put this one in here by accident, but let's go ahead and check it out. So here's Donald Trump. This is kind of what needs to happen. Okay, Trump's got to get back into office, and let's just pretend that Vince McMahon is the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping. So here we go. I don't watch wrestling.
To your head as you slapped Vince McMahon.
Well, he had no right to touch me, and he started playing around, and I gave him a wallop, and I think it had a pretty big impact. Actually, he's got a little problem with his face right now.
In truly Trump fashion. So that is spectacular. Okay. And on that front, here's why we need Donald Trump back in here to slap China around. This is because they're never going to leave us alone. Okay. Like they're very aggressively pursuing this agenda of global dominance. And I think that Canada is a prime target for them. And we're a prime target, not just because we're a high value target with tons of land and tons of resources. I mean, we have oil, we have gold, we have uranium. I mean, you name it. We have all the things that China wants and needs, and they are starved for energy, of course. Yeah, I mean, the other thing is that we're a very soft target. We don't have any military to speak of at this point in time. It's not like we can do much to defend our borders if it came down to it. So there's no military. We've got all of these resources that they want. And also we have been softened up, I think, for a number of years for authoritarian takeover. I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that just how indoctrinated a lot of Canadians are and how, soft they are on things like communism. So we seem to be rather naive with respect to the threat of the Chinese Communist Party, and also rather warm to the idea of to communist ideas. Okay, so here is True North, and they say China won't back down and take over of Canadian mineral companies, says Ambassador. The Chinese government isn't backing down on its bid to buy up majority stakes in Canadian critical mineral companies. This was the message recently relayed to Chinese ambassador to Canada, Kong Piwu, in comments recently made to Bloomberg. Politicizing normal commercial cooperation and using, this is a quote, sorry, politicizing normal cooperation and using national security as a pretext for political interference is wrong. China has expressed firm opposition to this. We will continue to do business on the basis of mutual respect and mutual benefit, close quote, said Kong. Sure, whatever, man. Kong told the news outlet that Chinese investors will continue doing business as usual and make bids for resource companies specializing in critical minerals abundant in Canada, including lithium, graphite, copper, and other rare earth elements. Dominating the critical mineral market is a key strategy for China to gain a competitive advantage over its economic competitors, as the minerals are used in manufacturing microchips in electronics and digital technology. Trudeau has signaled support for a critical mineral divestment strategy to counter China's push for access to the Canadian market. In partnership with the U.S., Canada established a critical mineral list to protect supply chains for the critical minerals needed for important manufacturing sectors, including communications technology, aerospace and defense, and clean technology. Additionally, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service has warned the Canadian government that foreign investment into Canadian resources was a key security risk. Quote, while the vast majority of foreign investment in Canada is carried out in an open and transparent manner, a number of state-owned enterprises, SOEs, and private firms with close ties to their government and or intelligence services can pursue corporate acquisition bids in Canada or other economic activities, close quote, claims CSIS. In 2020, Ottawa also prevented the acquisition of TMAC Resources' Hope Bay mine in northern Nunavut after launching a national security review into Shandong Gold's attempted purchase of the company. Good. Yeah, we should stop them from buying these resources up, no doubt about it. And these are critical. Like, and gold is they've been buying up gold like crazy, man. The Chinese have been buying up all this gold, and of course they're shifting to bricks. And here we are selling ourselves out and aiding them in fortifying that economic prong in the 5-prong strategy that is unrestricted warfare of the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. Back to the article. Despite this, several Chinese companies are continuing to make bids and buy stakes in Canadian copper, gold, and lithium projects, including Zijing Mining Group, Gangend Lithium, and Yintai Gold. Okay, so that's Cosmin Duryea, and he's been really good doing this lately. And speaking of that economic prong, Canadians are not doing so good these days. It is getting harder and harder to live here. So this is Justice Queen. She's tweeting this out, says, New York man is shocked about the cost of living in Canada. And this is, I think, a lot of this is caused by Chinese money laundering through our real estate markets, but also like we just stopped building houses. This was we kind of built a bunch of houses for the boomers in the early 70s, and they were like, "Thanks, guys." And when it came time to pay it forward, it was time to build gated communities for the boomers, and you Gen X gets a starter home, a 30-year-old fixer-upper. That wasn't a word until just a couple of decades ago. A starter home, that wasn't a thing for, say, the silent generation or the GI generation or any generation prior to the boomers. But okay, here is this guy talking about the cost of living in Canada, and I gather he's a Canadian born living in the United States. Holy smokes. Let me give that a refresh. I just pulled this up so that it's crazy. This the X video has been working for me very good the last couple of shows.
Okay. I am home visiting my parents this weekend for the holidays. I live in the West Village in New York City, the highest cost of living yuppie area ever in the history of the United States. I am never shocked when I get a dinner bill. I'm never shocked when I go on vacation. Nothing phases me. I've traveled all over the world. Tell me why I come home to Newmarket, Ontario, the suburbs of Toronto, and I'm shocked at the cost of living here. How are Canadian people making it work? Everybody involved with the economy right now needs to be fired immediately. We need to contact the UN and get a binding resolution here. Something sinister is going on in Canada, and I'm determined to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, I think that is the bottom of
What's
it. Really,
that?
it's the fact that the Chinese Communist Party is basically buying our way of life out from under us. And the security establishment is doing very little to stop it. As you can see here, here's Judy Trin, and she's tweeting this out. Former Mountie Bill Matcher, facing criminal charges of foreign interference, speaks publicly about allegations in an exclusive interview. Matcher says he's not an agent for China and has not betrayed his country. Well, that is what you would say if you were an asset for China and you had betrayed your country. So I'm not so sure we're going to be taking his word on that. And again, this might be one of these cases where, you know, he's not entirely aware of the fact that he's an asset either. I mean, I would consider, say, David Johnson to be something of an asset for the Chinese Communist Party, but I don't think that he's a witting asset. I think he's just dangerously naive for the position that he holds in our society. Okay, here's the article. Former Mountie William Matcher has made a career out of deception and dancing on the edge of danger. As a young officer, he nearly died after being jumped from behind and smashed repeatedly in the head with a steel bar. After transitioning into undercover work, Matcher was planted in the same cell as an Air India terror suspect. He infiltrated the Medellin drug cartel and was warned he was on a hit list after a $100,000 bounty was put on his head. His subterfuge maximized his easygoing demeanor and commerce degree from St. Mary's University, allowing him to pose as a clean-cut expert in money laundering. This work in the shadows came in handy when he was tasked to run the BC office of the RCMP's Financial Crime Unit before retiring in 2007. Now, Matcher is accused of being a foreign agent for China and charged under the Security of Information Act, the law used in Canada to prosecute alleged spies and turncoats. Quote, I'm a patriot, not a traitor, close quote, Matcher said in an exclusive interview with CTV News in Toronto. Quote, I'll stand in a courtroom, I'll take my polygraph, and I'll challenge any of these people making the accusations to take a polygraph, close quote, he said. The charges stem from Matcher's time in Hong Kong, where he lived for nearly 2 decades after retiring from the National Police Force. Since moving there, Matcher says he has worked with Chinese investment banks and law firms to recover stolen assets that were being laundered overseas. In 2016, he co-founded Emidir, a corporate asset recovery firm based in Hong Kong. This sounds an awful lot like Chinese police stations. I mean, that's what the Chinese police stations are all about. It's Operation Fox Hunt, where they say that they're looking for criminals. They're looking for people who fled the country because they're criminals, when really they're probably just political dissidents. Back to the article. In his hour-long interview, Matcher said he was aware the RCMP were investigating him and flew to Canada from Hong Kong last July to, quote, deal with the issue, close quote. Quote, obviously I miscalculated because I was arrested. I thought the truth would set you free, close quote. Instead, Matcher was taken into custody and spent weeks in the same Burnaby jail, where decades earlier he shared a cell with Air India bombing suspect Rupudam Singh Malik in order to tease out information. Wow, same cell, huh? That would be that is quite the coincidence. A matter of national security. The charges against Matcher were laid by the RCMP's Integrated National Security Enforcement Team, INSET. INSET's role is to track and disrupt threats to Canada's national security, including foreign interference. Following his arrest last July, the RCMP also charged Matcher with conspiring with another former RCMP officer, Kenneth Marsh, to, quote, obtain intelligence or services to benefit the People's Republic of China, close quote. At the time, authorities said Matcher allegedly, quote, contributed to the Chinese government's efforts to identify an inmate and an individual outside the scope of Canadian law, close quote. Security experts say it's likely Matcher's charges are related to international concerns about China's efforts to repatriate Chinese refugees, sorry, it's Chinese fugitives, and proceeds of crime stashed away overseas. The Chinese Communist Party statistics from October 2022 show more than 12,000 Chinese nationals have been, quote, involuntarily returned, close quote, to China from overseas under its 2 anti-corruption campaigns, Operation Fox Hunt and Skynet. So there it is. So those Chinese police stations that are still open in Canada, even though they've closed down several in the United States, that's Operation Fox Hunt. Like I said, they're hunting down dissidents under the guise of them being fugitives. According to Spanish NGO Safeguard Defenders, alleged fugitives were repatriated using extradition as well as covert methods such as threats and kidnapping. Not all of those forced to return home are suspected criminals. Human rights groups say fighting corruption was also a guise used by the Chinese Communist Party to silence its critics and control its diaspora. CTV News has confirmed that Vancouver's real estate developer and Chinese national Kevin Sun was Matcher's alleged target of foreign interference and intimidation, as previously reported by the Globe and Mail and the Bureau. But when reached out to for comment, Sun's lawyer James Karpik said in an email on March 12th that his client had not been interviewed by the RCMP, that he did not know Matcher, and that he had never spoken to him. Matcher declined to answer questions about the current charges he's facing related to Sun, but says that he always acted, quote, within the law, close quote. Operation Fox Hunt. According to its charge sheet, RCMP scrutinized Matcher's activities from 2014 to 2019 when Operation Fox Hunt was launched in 2014. China's state security would work with foreign law enforcement agencies and legal firms to repatriate nationals from across the globe to face justice in China. And this is a means of, they're demonstrating to their own population that we can reach out and touch you no matter where you go. You can never escape the talons of the Chinese Communist Party. During the state visit of China's Premier Li Keqiang in 2016, the Canadian government signed a treaty with China to work together to recover and share the return of stolen assets. According to Chinese state media, Canada was the first country to enter into such a treaty with China since it launched Fox Hunt. Isn't that great? Isn't it great how cozy we are in Canada with the Chinese Communist Party? We get along with them so well. And we're collaborating with them on the oppression of dissidents from China. It's a really wonderful thing, that a positive turn of events for Canada, wouldn't you say? Matcher has been open about his work as a corporate bounty hunter. In a February 2019 documentary produced by Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Matcher referred to himself as a, quote, hired gun, close quote. That same month, according to the minutes of a meeting in the British Council All-Party Parliamentary Group, Matcher said he was working with China to return, quote, US $1.2 trillion of fraudulently acquired money, close quote. Matcher says he's a capitalist, not a criminal. Quote, the fact is, unless you're a government lawyer or a government accountant or working for a corporation, everybody else is freelancing out there. Everybody's working and hustling for business, close quote, he said. Okay. It doesn't really, I don't know, doesn't bolster my confidence that he's engaged in law enforcement and not criminality here. Meng and the Michaels and Matcher. Matcher believes he came under suspicion shortly after the arrest of Huawei chief financial officer Meng Wanzhou and China's detention of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. Meng was arrested on December 1st, 2018 at the Vancouver International Airport by Canadian authorities after a New York judge issued a warrant for her arrest. She was initially accused of doing business with Iran and violated U.S. Economic sanctions. China would detain the two Michaels days later, alleging they were spies. The saga took 2.5 years to conclude and corroded the Chinese-Canadian relations. Well, good. I say just kick them out. Let's get rid of them, decouple altogether, short-term pain for long-term gain. Just send them back. In January 2019, Matcher was hired by a Chinese think tank to, all the communists, that is. I mean, I understand that there are some expats that have been living here for a very long time, and, we need them, especially when it comes to looking into everything being coordinated on WeChat and this kind of thing. A lot of people left to escape communism, but everybody was messing around. I'm like, send that ambassador back. The guy who was like, that Canada should discontinue these foolish games, or China will continue to prey a wrong until the very end. That was kind of the most menacing diplomatic communication I think I've ever seen in Canada. In January 2019, Matcher was hired by the Chinese think tank to gather information about extradition process in Meng's case. Aware of the politically charged climate in Canada, Matcher said he took the precautionary measure to, quote, self-report, close quote, his business activity. Concerned that the Canadian consulate in Hong Kong would be monitored by Chinese, Matcher says he decided to check in at the Canadian embassy in Bangkok and spoke with an RCMP liaison officer. Quote, can you have somebody from CSIS contact me? I asked. And a few hours later, somebody did, close quote, Matcher recounted. He refused to provide more details about the conversation with the CSIS agent. When asked bluntly if he was a CSIS asset, Matcher said, quote unquote, no comment. A few weeks after his visit to Thailand, Matcher flew to Vancouver to begin his research in the Meng extradition. Matcher expected to be pulled aside by the Canadian Border Services Agency at the airport, but was surprised when CBSA agents demanded he unlock his phone to verify there was no child pornography on his device. Matcher says a routine search for photos should take approximately 10 minutes. Instead, it took more than an hour. In hindsight, he suspects that a surveillance device was installed on his phone 4 years ago during that secondary screening. Okay. When contacted for comment, Canada Spy Agency responded in an email that, quote, it would be inappropriate for CSIS to comment on matters currently before the courts, close quote. The RCMP was also asked if it was aware Matcher had, quote, self-reported, close quote, to the Canadian Embassy in Bangkok, and was also asked if it had contacted the Vancouver real estate agent who was Matcher's alleged target. In an email response after this story was published, RCMP Media Relations said that it, quote, works closely with CSIS pursuant to our distinct and complementary mandates, close quote, and that it would be inappropriate to comment on an ongoing investigation. Oh my, quite the web. In an email response, media relations staff also stated that for, quote, privacy and operational reasons, close quote, the RCMP does not release information about investigations until it becomes a matter of public record. You mean like the firearms used in the Portapique massacre, Brenda Cuckey? Yeah, right. So, I mean, that is the way that it should be, but it hasn't. That is not the way that it has been in the last few years. Okay. Family separation. Matcher is currently living in Niagara Falls with his sister, who is one of his sureties. He posted a $50,000 bail and put up another $200,000 bond to secure his release. He needs to check in at the Hamilton police station once a week while he waits for his trial. When he was first arrested, Matcher claims jail guards prevented him from taking his thyroid cancer medication for 6 days, which he says resulted in a breakout of shingles on his body. I wonder if he's vaccinated. The former Mountie says he offered to pay a higher bond of $1 million so he could return to Hong Kong to continue his cancer treatments and see his family. He is married with 2 daughters, age 11 and 7 years old. Well, he's got $1 million and he wants to go back to Hong Kong. I don't know. That doesn't really sound like a retired public servant to me. Matcher said the court denied his request because it was concerned, quote, China may not let him leave, close quote. The updates from his wife and children are the calls that he simultaneously anticipates and dreads. During his interview, Matcher played a recording of a recent video call with his youngest daughter. I want daddy. Daddy, when are you coming home? Close quote. Wails the child. Quote, this is what I deal with every day. I don't want to be here. I want to be with my family. I think of the blood I've poured and spoiled for this country, close quote, and spilled for this country, close quote, said Matcher. The next step in his fight to return home will be his next court appearance on April 22nd. Matcher says his lawyer will make an application to quash the charges against him on jurisdictional grounds. The foreign interference he's accused of committing, the victim and his alleged co-conspirator all live in the Vancouver area, yet he's being tried in a Quebec court. Details. I don't know if I want to see him dismissed over that. Okay, so yeah, I mean, their tentacles are in here so deep. And this is another one of these tactics like the elite capture that we see them engaged in. Jean Chrétien went to work for China, and I think John McCallum did as well. John McCallum was the ambassador, as was Jean Chrétien. Or Jean? No, he wasn't an ambassador at any point, but John McCallum certainly was. So a lot of members of the liberal elite class tend to end up working for China or benefiting from their business relationships with them in some form or fashion after they leave office. Yeah, that's part of the strategy as well. I think the elite capture portion of it, and it's the blue, gold, yellow strategy is the one that not because I talk about 5th generational warfare and the unrestricted warfare that the Chinese generals even published a book on. That's the 5-pronged strategy of lawfare, economic, cyber, media, and terrorism. But then there's also the PRCs, like the CCP itself. They have their blue, gold, yellow strategy of hacking, blue for hacking, gold for bribery, and yellow for honeypots for like blackmail. So they're capturing all the elites while the PLA, the army itself, is engaged in these harder tactics of sabotaging economies and buying all of our housing out from under us. I want to see if I can find something on that. The what do you call it? The recent vote that we had here. Okay, so the vote that we had here last night. Oh, there's a big one going on down in the United States on the censorship front, because there's the TikTok ban. That's one thing that I reported on here already. Now, I'm not terribly concerned about the TikTok ban. It seems to be like it's pretty limited in scope. They even name ByteDance and TikTok in the legislation itself, and it does seem like there's a process in place to deal with these kind of things. It doesn't give these kind of broad sweeping powers to the president like you might think that it does, or that I would be concerned that it does. But there does seem to be a bit of a process. I want to see some more detail in it, sort of filled out, but I didn't see the red flags on it. And you know, it's clearly a psyop for the Chinese Communist Party, and it's going after our young people. And we have this transgender craze where 20% of Gen Z is now identifying as LGBTQAI plus. That's like 10 times the rate that we see in the boomer generation. And I think it has everything to do with, the fact that it's a social contagion, and TikTok tends to promote that social contagion. But there's also, separate from that, there was the issue with the government interfering with a lot of these social media companies, especially in the lead up to the 2020 election. I mean, they had retired FBI agents employed all over Facebook, and there was this back and forth, you know, where the government is treating social media platforms like subordinates and telling them what posts they got to limit. So yeah, here's Charlie Kirk, and he's tweeting out Justice Alito. There's a Supreme Court hearing on this taking place down in the United States here. So Charlie Kirk is tweeting out here, Justice Alito, quote, "The government is treating social media platforms like they're subordinates. You cannot outsource censorship and call it constitutional. You cannot have the FBI harassing Facebook and not call it coercion. You cannot suspend the Constitution because you say COVID is a once in a lifetime event. Free speech in our inheritance pay for by the blood of patriots over generations, and Democrats want to kill it." Yeah, I think Charlie Kirk is pretty spot on there. He's a pretty sharp guy. And yeah, that was another thing that I skipped over there when I was kind of giving the background around this. The COVID stuff they were really heavy on controlling the narrative around that. So a lot of this stuff is starting to come out now. We've got a pretty mixed bag when it comes to the SCOTUS, but not too bad overall. So here we go.
Exchanged between the White House and other federal officials, and Facebook in particular, but also some of the other platforms. And I see that the White House and federal officials are repeatedly saying that Facebook and the federal government should be partners. We're on the same team. Officials are demanding answers. I want an answer. I want it right away. When they're unhappy, they curse them out. There are regular meetings. There is constant pestering of Facebook and some of the other platforms, and they want to have regular meetings. And they suggest, they suggest rules that should be applied, and why don't you tell us everything that you're going to do so we can help you and we can look it over. And I thought, wow, I cannot imagine federal officials taking that approach to the print media, our representatives over there. If you did that to them, what do you think the reaction would be? And so I thought, you know, the only reason why this is taking place is because the federal government has got Section 230 and antitrust in its pocket, and it's to mix my metaphors, and it's got these big.
Yeah, Section 230 is also the one that says that social media platforms are not publishers. They're just media. It's more like talking on the telephone than it is like publishing in a newspaper. So they don't hold them to the same like editorial standards, right? They can't be sued for libel based on what somebody else posts on there. So, but what they have done is they seem to have gotten like content moderation. They've gotten to become more like they're not just passive media anymore, they are enforcing an editorial perspective, and so they should probably lose those that shielding from liability that comes along with the 230 protection if they're going to behave that way. You're either a publisher or a passive medium. You can't have it both ways. So that's what he's talking about there.
Big clubs available to it, and so it's treating Facebook and these other platforms like they're subordinates. Would you do that to the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or the Associated Press or any other big newspaper or wire service?
So there's a lot packed in there. I want to give you one very specific answer first, and then step back out to the broader context. So specifically, you mentioned demanding an answer right away and cursing them out. The only time that happens is in an email that's about the president's own Instagram account. It's not about moderating other people's
Okay, we'll put that aside. There's all the rest. So constant meetings, constant emails. We want answers. Right. We're partners. We're on the same team. Do you think that the print media regards themselves as being on the same team as the federal government, partners with the federal government?
So potentially in the context of an effort to get Americans vaccinated during a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. And I really think that piece of context, it doesn't change the First Amendment principles, but it's relevant to how they apply here. And I think it's important to understand that at this time, this was a time when thousands of Americans were still dying.
As in, when we get scared, we just abandon our principles that are enshrined in the Constitution.
Every week, and there was a hope that getting everyone vaccinated could stop the pandemic. And there was a concern that Americans were getting their news about the vaccine from these platforms, and the platforms were promoting, not just posting, but promoting bad information.
I understand all that, and I know the objectives were good. But once again, they were also getting their news from the print media and the broadcast media and cable media, and I just can't imagine the federal government doing that to them. But maybe I'm naive. Maybe that goes on behind the scenes. I don't. But it struck me as, wow, this is not what I understand the relationship to be. That's all.
But I do. I think this is important because I have the same reaction that you do, but these emails look unusual. I think the idea that there'd be back and forth between the government and the media isn't unusual at all. When the White House press secretary on July 16th is asked about this by the press at the time, what she says is, of course, we talk to the platforms just the way we talk to all of you when we have concerns about what you're doing, when we have information that you might find helpful. Now, there's an intensity of the back and forth here, and there's an anger that I think is unusual, but the context for that, I think, is that these platforms were saying publicly, we want to help. We think we have a responsibility to give people accurate information and not bad information. And we're doing everything we can to meet that goal. That's where this language of partnership comes from. It's not just from the White House. It's these platforms, which are powerful, sophisticated entities, saying we're doing the best we can. And the anger, I think really most of the anger when you read the emails, and I appreciate that you have, because I think you have to look at them in context. The anger is when the officials think that the platforms are not being transparent about the scope of the problem or aren't giving the information that's available.
All right. So some pretty positive developments coming out of the United States there. Definitely good to see. Okay. I wanted to get into some of the stuff because the really big news, I think, coming out over the last 24 hours was the vote in the House of Commons on Israel, Gaza there. So, yeah, I'm going to just line up a couple of different stories that I had kind of squirreled away here for you guys. Okay, so just to start us off, let's get a look at Jimmy Singh. Here's Jimmy. And Bruce McConaughey is tweeting out, they're using the war in Gaza to filibuster time in the House of Commons. You can see why Trudeau and Jagmeet are okay with the pro-Hamas PR rallies and protests. It lets them ignore real issues in Canada. It's perfect cover for politicians whose policies have killed so many here. Yeah, pretty spot on, I think. And this is what's happening too is also this kind of leftist orthodoxy is breaking down and eating itself because, you know, they're the open and tolerant and blah, blah, blah. And we're all Islamophobic for not being more accepting. But at the same time, they are dealing with like real in your face, no kidding, like anti-Semitism and terrorism. We just had a massacre. Like they went over there and massacred over 1,200 Jews. So what about them? And the call for the ceasefire, myself, I think it should be a call for surrender. You should be calling for Hamas to surrender. Then you'll get your ceasefire. This could all be over tomorrow. That's all they got to do is return the hostages and surrender. That's what it's been since day one. And so there's all this kind of fence sitting, and the left is eating itself. It's collapsing because it's like, who are we supposed to be more tolerant for? Are we supposed to be more tolerant for the Muslims, or more tolerant for the Jews? And this is what happens with identity politics, is it really does break down when you end up in a situation like this, because it's about right and wrong. It's about, people's right to live and death. And it's about, it's about doing the right thing. It's got nothing to do with all of this pandering and stuff. It all breaks down when it comes up against a real moral conundrum like this. Okay, so here is Jimmy.
South. The people of Gaza are facing unspeakable violence. Thousands of children have been killed, and vital supplies like food, medicine, and water are scarce. Today, the NDP is calling on the government to do everything in its power to stop the violence and release the hostages. Will the Prime Minister vote today for peace?
The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
So there's not much to disagree with there, is there? So they're labeling this thing as a call for a ceasefire, but really they're asking for the same thing that the Israeli military is asking for, which is to release the hostages and surrender.
I agree with my honourable colleague. The violence must stop. Hostages must be released. Humanitarian aid must go into Gaza. We need to make sure that Israeli and Palestinian civilians are protected. And that is the position of the government. We will be there to make sure that there is long-term peace in the region, and of course, to make sure that the Jewish community and the Muslim community and all communities across the country are well secured and can live peacefully here as well at home.
Okay, so a bunch of empty rhetoric, which is about what we would expect from these people at this point. And I mean, it's a real humanitarian crisis, and these guys are just going to play politics with it and make all of these empty virtue signaling statements, because that's all we can really expect from them. And we also have, here is... This is Laurel Collins of the NDP, and she also gave a very now this one I actually thought, like, okay, for NDP, this is, I guess, at least she's kind of taken a principled approach to it, so it's not quite as pandering as Jimmy Singh. So here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech.
Has called for an end of arms sales to the state of Israel. And specifically, they've called out Canada for fueling this crisis with military trade. The International Court of Justice made a ruling to prevent genocide. For years, New Democrats have called for an arms embargo. We are also calling on the government to do more to stop arms smuggling to Hamas. The member spoke about the increase in military trade that's happened since this conflict started. It's not enough, as the minister said, to go export permit by export permit. We need an arms embargo. Canada must do more to prioritize human rights, international law, and peace for Palestinians and Israelis. Can the member speak to how horrific it is that this government is still allowing military trade to the state of Israel? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Like, at least she comes out and says it. And Jesus, we're doing an awful lot of trade with, say, Azov Battalion over there in Ukraine, and I'm sure she's all for that. So, what is it about Israel that makes this so distasteful? The coming to the aid of our allies in that way, and the aid is getting into to Gaza as well. So, yeah, Darlene is saying, isn't our military arms all in Ukraine? Yeah, that's pretty much the size of it. I saw something there this morning where we were shipping off a bunch of labs as well. So it's just incredible. We don't have anything left. We've already sent it all over to Ukraine anyway. So there's that. But it's interesting because there are conflicts going on like all over the place, and we support all kinds of these. Like, where is all the outrage over Myanmar, for example? who expelled the Rohingya back there in about 2017. So that was a Muslim group, minority in Myanmar, who were expelled after multiple terrorist attacks, especially on police stations. And they've been living in refugee camps ever since. So, where is all the outrage over that? I think that the outrage is really the result of no Jews, no news. That's about the size of it, right? Let me see here. We got a couple more stories on this one. So I'm just gonna set this up for you guys. I'm flying by the seat of my pants here, guys, but let's go ahead and we'll dive into a couple of more here because there's always all kinds to talk about, right? Okay, so here is something from the other side of the aisle. This is Anthony Housefather, and he gives a pretty impassioned speech, actually. I don't know if I'll play the whole thing, but let's see. I'll play as much of it as makes sense. So here we go.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the the President of the Treasury Board.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am a Canadian, I am a Jew, and I am a Zionist. I am proud to have been born in this country. I am proud that my family came here in the 19th century and helped build this country. My family members fought in the World War I and World War II. We are part of Canada and lucky to be so. I've represented Canada in swimming internationally. I've represented Canada as a parliamentarian. And there's no place in the world I want to be other than in Canada. The Jewish community, of which I am part, is a religious community that has existed for thousands of years, but we're also a people. And we, since we've been here in 1760, have helped build this country. We got enormous opportunities, more than we've received anywhere else in history. But we've also, in academia, in law, in medicine, in physics, in science, in sports, in journalism, we have helped build this country. And 95% of Canadian Jews are Zionists. Zionism means we believe that we have a right to have one Jewish state in our ancestral homeland. Jews are indigenous to Israel. And we have had a history where Jews have faced persecution in every country in the world. We were expelled from England in 1290. We were expelled from Spain and Portugal in the 1490s. We faced the Crusades where people were killed. We were put in ghettos throughout Europe. We faced the Holocaust. Jews were expelled from Arab lands in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And we needed one place where every Jew in the world knew if things went wrong in their country that they could go. And that is Israel, and that's what Zionism means. So when I get horrible, horrible threats and emails saying I'm a dirty Zionist instead of a dirty Jew, that's what Zionism means. So at all these demonstrations around the country, outside of synagogues, and outside of Jewish schools, and outside of Jewish community centers, where people are screaming about how horrible Zionists are, well, I am a Zionist, and I'm not embarrassed or ashamed of being a Zionist. And Canadian Jews should not have to live through what we're living through right now. My community is terrified. We are being intimidated over and over by people protesting outside of Jewish buildings. Canadian Jews have no control over what happens in the state of Israel. Yet for some reason, Jewish buildings across this country are being targeted. In my own riding, at the Jewish community offices where the Jewish Public Library and the Holocaust Museum are located, demonstrators went on private property, surrounded the building, blocked access to the building, and blocked anyone from leaving for over 3 hours. This is happening all over the place.
Yeah, and that's something I've been pointing out here quite a bit. Is it's like there are all these boycotts of these Jewish-owned businesses, and they're going into Jewish neighborhoods, and just like Anthony Housefather is saying here, they can't do anything about the situation over in Gaza. And they have nothing to do with it. So it doesn't really. I don't think it has as much to do with preventing the suffering and death of the people of Gaza as it has to do with anti-Semitism or Jew hatred.
And the demonstrators, while they are perfectly allowed and right to demonstrate wherever they want, They cannot go on private property and they can't block other people from exercising their right to free speech. If I can't enter a building because I can't hear a speaker and they block me and they yell at me and they scream at me and stop me from going in, well then their rights are infringing on my rights. And police need to step in and act as police, and all leaders across this country need to tell them to do so, because this is not fair anymore. It is too much. And Jewish Canadians just don't deserve this.
Anne is making a really good point too. She's saying, where's all the outrage over Christians getting slaughtered in Nigeria? Yeah, I was just reporting on this, on that late last week, I guess it would have been. But yeah, I mean, this is something that that happens all the time in Muslim, predominantly Muslim countries. And in Nigeria, they've been going around just butchering entire villages of Christians, and you don't hear a peep about it in the mainstream.
On campuses across this country, Jewish students have told me horrible stories from British Columbia to Newfoundland about being intimidated on campus, about walking into dormitories and having anti-Israel slogans through the walls. They walk into a building and they're asked, are you a Zionist or not? And if they're a Zionist, supposedly they're not allowed into their dorm. This is not Canada. This is not the country that I know and love, and nobody should be forced to feel this way, which is then how I get to this motion. Because the Jewish community right now is demoralized and intimidated. This motion creates one winner and one loser. Most Canadian Muslims will vastly support this motion, and they're feeling lots of pain right now in watching the events that are happening in Gaza. But Canadian Jews, if this motion is adopted, will feel tremendous pain, because the way this motion is constructed, it is clearly creating a false equivalency of the state of Israel and the terrorist organization Hamas. And in the event that we want this war to end, Hamas can easily lay down arms and surrender and return the hostages and stop using citizens of Gaza as human shields.
Hear, hear.
And essentially, while I appreciate my colleagues in the NDP, this motion, as some other colleagues have said, rewards Hamas. We, for generations in Canada, under successive Liberal and Conservative governments, have said that the way to recognize a Palestinian state, which we all want, living in peace side by side with Israel and in dignity and offering dignity to both peoples, should come when the two states, the two parties, negotiate their borders and the Palestinians elect a government to govern that territory. The West Bank is governed by Fatah, which has been in power without an election for 20 years. Mr. Abbas was elected in 2004. And on the other side, on Gaza, you have a terrorist organization, Hamas, that has not held elections since 2007 and is recognized by Canada as being a terrorist organization. So Hamas launched the deadliest attack on Israel, the deadliest pogrom against Jews since the Holocaust. And we're changing our foreign policy to reward Hamas and say, good for you, terrorists. You attacked a sovereign state, killed lots of people, including babies and women and everyone else, and raped and pillaged and brought people back as hostages who have now been there for almost 5 months. And yeah, let's recognize that state that we've never recognized before. What a great idea for other places in the world where terrorism ferments. Who would love this? Iran. Iran would love this, because Iran is the people in the Middle East that are fermenting terrorism everywhere, whether it's Hezbollah in the north or Hamas in the south. They are supporting this, and they are loving every minute as the world tears itself apart.
That is a good point as well. You know, why is it that that Israel is also fighting this fight on their northern border at the same time, right? If it was really all about Hamas and the Palestinian state for the people of Gaza or something like that, then why is it that they're having to fight Hamas at the exact, or sorry, Hezbollah on the northern border at the exact same time? It doesn't have anything to do with establishing statehood for anybody. It has everything to do with destroying the Jewish state and probably engaging in a genocide. So,
to criticize Israel instead of focusing on Iran and its regime. And when you talk about arms sales, Mr. Speaker, let's first recognize that the American government supplies billions of dollars of arms to Israel. Canada and the Canadian government don't sell arms to Israel directly. We have provided for many years only non-lethal weapons because nobody's applied for lethal weapon permits. And these non-lethal weapons are going to a friend and ally, Israel, at a time of war. Imagine what the world would look like if all of the countries in the world, which I presume is the principle of the motion, say we will not ship arms or even non-lethal weapons to Israel, while Hamas and Hezbollah will continue to get their weapons from Iran through Egypt and through Lebanon.
And we fund them through UNRWA. We never even missed a payment. We said we were going to cut off the funding to UNRWA after it was revealed that employees not only aided Hamas and have been for years, but participated in the massacre. So we said, oh yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. Now, mind you, this was something that under the Harper government we got rid of. We stopped funding UNRWA under the Harper government because we recognized that it was just a money laundering scheme for international terrorists like Hamas. That's what they were doing. And then, so we stopped that under Harper, reinstated it under Trudeau, found out that they were using the funds that we're sending them to bolster Hamas and engage in terrorism themselves. So we cut it off. And before we even had a chance to miss a payment, it reinstated. So we're still funding that side of the war.
So Israel, while it has missiles launched at it from Hezbollah in the north and Hamas in the south, will be unable to fight back and be bereft of weapons. That, Mr. Speaker, is a false equivalency that we're now making between Hamas, a terrorist organization, and Israel. And I don't think that this motion goes toward furthering anything toward peace. In fact, it's doing the opposite. It's telling our friend and ally that they're being treated in a different way than the terrorist organization, which is benefiting from weapons being shipped to it. I had the opportunity with the member from Calgary Nose Hill and the member for Eglinton Lawrence and the member for Thornhill and the member for Winnipeg. I wish I could remember the name of the riding, Charles Wood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley, to visit Israel. And we saw the wreck of the destruction of Hamas. We visited a kibbutz where we saw buildings burned and people who had been burned to death in their safe rooms. We saw blood splattered all over the place, houses ransacked. We heard from people who had been terrorized. And you have to understand, Mr. Speaker, Israel feels that if they don't destroy the terrorist group Hamas, there will be another pogrom that kills more Israelis tomorrow or the next week or the next month. So I understand.
Yeah, this is like ceasefire number 5 at this point that they're calling for. Every time they call a ceasefire, Hamas just uses that time to reconstitute, rebuild, and strengthen itself so it can go back and hit them harder the next time. So I can't say that, I blame Israel for saying no more. Like enough is enough already. Hamas has to go. And that's all that is required for this this war to end, is if Hamas surrenders and returns the hostages. Otherwise, like anything less than that, and you're just going to embolden more terrorism. Like that's a success from their side. If they get away with this massacre and hostage taking, then they're going to take that as a success. And so, I think internationally, terrorism is just going to be bolstered and terrorists emboldened.
And how horrible it is to see the situation in Gaza. I understand how the world looks at it with revulsion to see people dying. But we also have to understand that a democratic nation has been on many occasions attacked, war started against it, and now all sides in Israel feel they need to fight back. And so, Mr. Speaker, I stand with Israel, our democratic ally, our friend. And when a time of war is when you look at countries and you say, do you stand with our ally or not? Mr. Speaker, Canada should be standing with Israel. Canada should be defending the right of Israel to fight back against a terrorist organization. And we should not be passing motions that make the terrorist organization equivalent to a democratic state. Thank you.
Question.
All right, I think that was a pretty powerful speech by Anthony Housefather, and this is not a full throated endorsement of Anthony Housefather. I will probably remember him most for his statement in the House of Commons in committee there when they were asking him about the vaccine contracts, and they didn't want to hand over the contracts so we could know the conditions that we signed on for. And he was basically saying, of course we didn't test the vaccine. We don't want you guys, knowing that they didn't go through the regular testing protocols before we put this thing to market, because everybody was so desperate for vaccines. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I think you guys were desperate to force them on us. But that was what he said. I don't think I'll ever. I will always remember him for that more than anything. Okay, and here is an article from the National Post, National Compost, and it says they're incentivizing terrorism. Canadian relative of Gaza hostage calls NDP's Palestinian motion disgusting. And somebody was just asking what motion this is. I'm not sure what the number of the motion is, but it's a motion to call for a ceasefire. And they were also calling to recognize Palestinian statehood. But the way that they've rejigged this motion now, it seems like they're just saying, give back the hostages so the war can end. So it's all pandering. Like there are real lives that hang in the balance here, and it's just more empty virtue signaling and political pandering. I can't see this going anywhere. It's just gross, right? Okay. So here's National Compost, and it says they're incentivizing terrorism. Canadian relative of Gaza hostage calls NDP's Palestinian motion disgusting. It's going to come back and bite the Western world in its butt, because this isn't going to stay in Israel, says Ashley Waxman Bakshi. And I tend to agree with that. I did a whole live stream on this not long after the massacre. It was titled "After Saturday Comes Sunday." That's actually a proverb in the Middle East, as in after Saturday, the Sabbath, the Jews, comes Sunday, the day of worship, the Christians, as in after we get rid of the Jews, we go for the Christians. And whether that just applies to the Middle East, I mean, the Middle East, North Africa, Turkey, like that all used to be Roman territory before it was conquered by the Muslims within 100 years of Muhammad's death. And they've been attacking and enslaving Europeans ever since. So, all the way up to the Ottoman Empire entering the First World War by declaring war on all of Christendom. And that's how it ended up collapsing, was because it lost in the First World War. And that's where the Brits ended up with the mandate all over the Middle East. And people will say, oh, the Brits that went around carving up the Middle East and blah, blah, blah. Well, maybe if you didn't declare war on all of Christendom, like blame the Ottomans. But that's part of the psyop. I think that's how the propaganda works, is it always blames the West for everything wrong in the world. And whenever the West gets attacked and fights back, they start the story with the counteroffensive. That's how all these narratives start, whether you're talking about the campaign in India or whether you're talking about colonialism. It always starts with the West fighting back and winning. The British didn't just willy-nilly decide, hey, what we'd like to do is go around carving up the Middle East and building all these fiefdoms. It was that the Ottoman Empire declared war on them and ended up collapsing in the process. And then there's a need to mitigate harm, because you have failed states all over the place. You have this massive failed state. So they went around, building states. And we ended up with a lot of odious regimes. But I think what we're kind of relearning perhaps in the last few decades is that, say, somebody like Bashar al-Assad, somebody was just asking over on Rumble here, they were talking about how how Israel funded Hamas. That is kind of something that Western governments have been engaged in for decades now, is we're looking for allies in these regions. And the United States funded ISIS, don't forget. It was the case during the 2000s that the thinking at the time was that Bashar al-Assad was just such an odious dictator. Like, he had to go. They had to get rid of him. Now, I think that the boomers are just kind of warmongering, everything from Libya. I understand that like Mad Dog in the Middle East was what Ronald Reagan called a guy in Libya there. I'm brain farting on his name right now, but He called him the mad dog of the Middle East. This is the guy who funded the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, and did all kinds of things to try to, make life harder for the West and blah, blah, blah. Like, I get that. But at the same time, now that he's gone, we have open air slave markets in Libya. And with the case of Bashar al-Assad, like, we funded rebel groups within the country to try to overthrow their own dictator. But as it turns out, those rebel groups are even worse than the dictator we were trying to get rid of. So it may just be the case that all over the Middle East, where we see, even in the case of Iran, where the United States backed the Shah before the Ayatollahs, successfully revolted. It seems to be the case that all over the place, like, these brutal dictators are probably just the best option available in those countries, or as close as we can get to the best option available. Because if you look at, Iran from the 70s, there are women going to university and wearing miniskirts and all this stuff. Not anymore. They're wearing garbage bags. Same thing in Afghanistan. Same thing all over the place, where you have these Islamist terrorist organizations engaging in these revolts against the British installed regimes. And they end up worse off after the revolt, right? You end up with Sharia and all kinds of oppression, more so than we saw even under some of these brutal dictators. So I think what's happening with a lot of these stuffs, Bullrock is saying CIA refers to this as blowback. Chalmers Johnson is the guy who coined that term, blowback, and that's the title of his most famous book. You can check that out. And blowback is a real thing too. And it's worth discussing for sure. There's blowback even in, say, like Japan, because the Americans have just been there for so long, and there were cases where American soldiers, like, actually raped girls and things like that. Like, we're dealing with humans, right? And there's going to be stuff like that over time, like, you're going to see people engaging in these cruel acts because we're humans, and it gets messy. So you do see things like blowback there in places like Japan and South Korea. But the Middle East is a more complex case than that. I don't think it's entirely because of blowback as a result of Western interventions in there. Not that they didn't deserve it after declaring war on us by declaring war on all of Christendom. But it can't all be attributed to that. I think a lot of it also has to do with just what Donald Trump called radical Islamic terror, right? There's an undercurrent out there, a strong one at that seems to think that the rest of us should be living according to their rules. Jihad really is something like the cause to bring the globe under Sharia. So, all right, here's the article. The Canadian relative of a woman kidnapped by Hamas nearly 6 months ago described Monday's motion calling for recognition of Palestinian statehood as, quote unquote, disgusting. Yeah, you're giving the terrorists exactly what they want. You're telling them, hey, terrorism works, guys. Here's your reward. Ashley Waxman-Baxi said the motion does little but embolden extremism and carries little meaning if it also doesn't specifically exclude Hamas from any future Palestinian state. Quote, they're incentivizing terrorism because they're saying if you carry out an attack that's so bad that it creates a huge response, the Western world is basically going to forget about it, close quote, she said on Monday during a visit to Ottawa. Yeah, I just think we've been so heavily propagandized for so long that it's like every time the West goes to war, it's like, oh, shame on the West for going to war. And it's like, it is the default condition. I think I showed a clip of General Flynn expressing the same sentiment. It's like, war is a fact of life. It's a fact of the human condition and of the foreseeable future. Maybe someday we'll be able to move past it, but this is not that day. So the choice here is how you do it. It's a question, it's a question of how you do it. It's not whether you go to war. I mean, I think we're going to get attacked regardless. War is supposed to be, from the Western perspective, a harm mitigation strategy. We go to war when not going to war is the more harmful option. And there's all this self-flagellating that's resulted from what I think is a commie psyop. It's been going on at least since the 50s. That says that we're the warmongers who started all. And it's like, no, we're the most peaceful people on earth. It's just that the rest of the world won't leave us alone. Okay, back to the article. Quote, it's going to come back to bite the Western world in the butt because this isn't going to stay in Israel. It's sending a message to every terrorist organization around the world, said Bakshi, Canadian Israeli content creator and one of Israel's most viewed influencers. Bakshi is the cousin of Adam Berger, a 19-year-old woman kidnapped by Agam Berger, a 19-year-old woman kidnapped by Hamas terrorists from her home in Nahal, Oz on October 7th. The video from the day of the attack showed a handcuffed and bloody Berger being bundled into a truck by Hamas terrorists. The House of Commons is set to debate the non-binding NDP-sponsored motion Monday evening, which, among other demands, calls on Canada to recognize a Palestinian state. Born in Hamilton, Bakshi moved to Israel in 2006, where she would eventually turn social media posts about makeup and beauty tips into her full-time career. Today, her YouTube channel features a mix of makeup and beauty content alongside commentary about the ongoing war against Hamas. Bakshi also lectures at Reichman University in Tel Aviv and is an outspoken advocate for Israel. Since October 7th, she has campaigned extensively on behalf of hostages and their families. That's interesting. She does a makeup channel and she also lectures at the University of Tel Aviv. Interesting. Okay. Bakshi took exception on how the motion is being presented, saying that the request for Hamas to release their hostages while also calling for a ceasefire renders the motion both hypocritical and disingenuously unbalanced. And I would say meaningless as well. It's an empty virtue signal, 1,000%. Quote, they're pandering to the Muslim vote. That's what they're trying to do here. Quote, as a family member of a hostage, the only thing that they're doing is sending any possibility of a deal literally into the garbage, close quote, she said. Quote, when the Hamas sees Israel's closest allies in the West coming against Israel at a time like this, Hamas will say, why should we negotiate any deal, close quote. Yeah, that is the case. I mean, I think they think that our resolve is going to weaken over time and they'll just drag this out as long as they can because, as Osama bin Laden said, the West doesn't have the stomach for a long war. And, you know, we saw what happened with Afghanistan. And that I think also emboldens the global jihad movement. Letting the West act as a proxy for Hamas in the ceasefire negotiations removes any incentive for Hamas to ever release the hostages, Bakshi said. Monday's vote comes just 2 days before a delegation of Canadian relatives of October 7th victims arrive in Parliament Hill to call for sanctions and an RCMP investigation into the murder and rape of Canadians by Hamas. Erwin Kotler, former Justice Minister and founder of the Rahul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights, said Wednesday's visits by the families underscores Canada's urgent need to ensure both justice and accountability for Canadian victims of Hamas's crimes against Canadians, as well as the hostages still held by the terror group. Quote, every day that these hostages are in Hamas captivity is a standing crime against humanity, close quote, Kotler said. Bakshi said that any credible proposal for Palestinian statehood should feature clauses specifically excluding Hamas as a prerequisite. Quote, even in recent history with the Oslo Camp David Accords, there were so many attempts at peace. Israel wanted a two-state solution, but it was the Palestinians who also said no, close quote, she said. Yeah, and that was what Bill Clinton said at the time too. He was looking at the Palestinian side and said, "You guys have been here for 2 weeks and you have said no to absolutely everything that's been put on the table." I don't think, and you know, it was Yasser Arafat who eventually signed the accords. And when asked about it, how could you sign a deal with the kafir? Basically, that's what they call infidels. It's the kafir. That's us. He said something to the effect of, remember Hudaybiyah. Hudaybiyah was a treaty that Muhammad signed with the Meccans. It was supposed to be a 10-year treaty, and like a year later or 2 years later, he turned around and attacked them and ended up conquering Mecca. So he was quite successful as a result of breaking that treaty. And essentially what I think Yasser Arafat was intimating to the global jihadi movement is, it's like he says, it's a Hudaybiyah treaty. Like, we're just signing this now so we can build our strength and come back and hit them harder later. And that's what's going to happen with Hamas if they don't get them out of there right now. I mean, Hamas should be destroyed the way that ISIS was at this point. Quote, Canada, she said, has an important part to play in the peace process, but described the motion as a means of Canada to quietly condemn Israel while also legitimizing anti-Semitism. Quote, it's strengthening Hamas and letting terrorism win, close quote, she said. Quote, it's endangering the future of not only every Israeli like me who lives there now and my children, but also every Jewish Canadian here, close quote. Yeah, I think that is probably true, and we're seeing that all over the place with some of these anti-Semitic attacks and the like in Canada. Oh, sorry, let me get rid of that. Just 1 second. I got a couple more things here to run through for you guys. But that is not it. And again, just bear with me, guys. I'm flying by the seat of my pants because my guest didn't show up. But there's, like I said, there's always so much to talk about. Okay. So I got a couple more articles here related to this. Here is Mossab Hassan Youssef. And I show him quite a bit because I think he's a really powerful voice in this. I'm always talking about how, we need to empower the reformers. I think he actually converted to Christianity, but he is the son of one of the Hamas founders. So he's like Hamas royalty, and he turncoated and started acting as informant for the IDF. And he's credited with saving thousands of lives from suicide bombings, especially during the Second Intifada. So, and he lives in California now, I believe. And he's been very outspoken through all of this. He's very much, with the Israelis on this, even though he was born in Gaza. He's born and raised in Gaza, and he's Hamas royalty. So I find him to be a very powerful voice in all this. He says the freedom fighters must eat first. Children can wait. Hamas killed the starving Gazans trying to take international aid, then hurried to accuse Israel of shooting civilians receiving aid. The pro-Palestine social media warriors call this the quote-unquote flower massacre, the latest false narrative in their comic history book. So he's showing some drone footage here. This is something that I've been talking about as well. I've shown some footage of, these aid trucks arriving in Gaza. Israel's not stopping any aid from going through there. But they're sending in these aid trucks. They're being seized by Hamas. I've shown video of Hamas leaders showing up in their fancy cars to take aid for themselves. I showed one here I think it was just yesterday, where the guy was complaining about how the MREs tasted. They were dropping. So now they're airdropping stuff in there. So Hamas doesn't get its hands on it the way that they get a hold of these trucks that are being shipped in. And the guy was complaining about this MRE, but he was also saying that he bought it just up the street. So, we're dropping this aid in there, like, here's all this free food, guys. We don't want people starving to death. And the people running the place, Hamas, will just take it all for themselves and sell it. They'll take it for themselves to feed themselves first, let their own people starve unless they want to buy some from them so they can continue funding a lot of these arms. But here is some drone footage of just such an event. So it's, a little granular and blobby when you're looking at this kind of footage, but he's probably 10,000 feet up or something, just zoomed right in. And you can see, but you can still see, like, this guy is firing rounds right here. He's circled right here. So he's shooting. This isn't the IDF. There he is pushing somebody. Okay, so these people are trying to get to these aid packages. They're being dropped. They got these Hamas fighters. Looks like he just shot that guy. Yep. There he is shooting. You can see the spent casings coming out of the ejection port of his rifle. This guy's pushing, pointing the gun at these people. Just shot another one. I think I'm on repeat now. Yep. Okay. So yeah, that's what's really going on. And they'll scream at the international community that Israel is causing a famine or starvation somewhere there in Gaza. It's not Israel. It's just, tyrants always accuse us of what they themselves are guilty. Okay, here's one from Warren Kinsella, Toronto Sun. An FYI to MPs, Hamas is lying about death toll in Gaza. And this is another theme that I've been showing here quite a bit. Hamas's own numbers don't make sense. They follow like a linear trajectory that's a straight line when you graph it out. And that doesn't happen in a real war zone. And this has been going on for a long, long time. But I think the watershed moment for hopefully most of us was with the Al Shifa hospital. First, it was reported that the hospital was leveled by Israel, and by the time it was all said and done, like they had pictures. They had pictures where they had all these bodies in the parking lot, and they had the doctors with their stethoscopes in this picture. It was all propaganda. It was just it was Hamas had fired off a bunch of rockets. One of them failed and hit a car in the parking lot of El Shifa. And then they tried to spin that to get the propaganda win. They'll use their own kids as human shields. They will shoot at their own people fleeing northern Gaza like they did early on. People carrying white flags, and the Hamas will set up snipers to shoot at them for trying to leave because they want them to stay there. They want to maximize the civilian casualties so they can use their bodies to get the propaganda win and say, look at how awful Israel is. When in fact, by Hamas's own numbers, civilian casualties are only about 1/6 the rate of the global average for the 21st century. So it's bomb for bomb, that is. If you count it day by day, then you're going to come up with something different. It's going to look worse. But if you count it bomb for bomb, then it's actually quite precise. Okay, so here's the article from Kinsella. He says the death toll in Gaza was repeatedly cited by Canadian parliamentarians on Monday as they voted on an NDP resolution to, quote, officially recognize the state of Palestine, close quote, and demand an immediate ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war, which was amended at the last minute before being passed in the House of Commons by a vote of 204 to 117. Over and over, MPs claim that 32,000 Gazans have been killed by Israel, most of them women and children. Over and over, they gave just one justification for recognizing the state that is run by a listed terrorist entity, the death toll. But what if the death toll has been faked? Because almost certainly it has been. 5 reasons. The source. There is just one source for all the numbers cited by Canadian parliamentarians, the Gaza Health Ministry. Hamas seized control of Gaza in 2007 and took over the ministry, ensuring their own people ran it. Yeah, and they've been completely embedded in the hospitals and the whole shebang. So it's hard to tell where Hamas ends and ministries begin. I mean, they are the government in that territory. So it's kind of the, there is no clear delineating line here. They control all of these ministries. The ministry's director general, Medhat Abbas, answers directly to Hamas. Abbas has let Hamas store weapons in Gaza hospitals, operate out of them, and even keep Israeli hostages prisoner in some hospitals. During the Second World War, Canada and its allies did not accept the National Socialist German Doctors League had to say about casualties because they had a vested interest in lying. Why would Canada now accept the word of a health ministry run by a terrorist organization? The precedent, on October 17, 2023, Gaza Health Ministry declared that Al-Ahli hospital in Gaza, Al-Ali, I think, hospital in Gaza had been bombed by Israel and 500 people killed. It made headlines around the world. The problem, it was a lie. The hospital had not been destroyed. It still stands, and hundreds were not killed. And most importantly, Israel did not do it. The Palestinian side did. Human Rights Watch is no friend of Israel, but it has confirmed that a Palestinian, quote, rocket-propelled munition, close quote, hit the hospital parking lot, not the hospital itself. On the Gaza Health Ministry death toll, concluded Human Rights Watch, quote, we are unable to corroborate the count, close quote. Yeah, that means it means it was BS. And he's saying the Al-Ali hospital, it sounds an awful lot like the Al-Shifa hospital case there. So I'm not even sure if they're two different names for the same place or if these are two different incidents we're talking about. Okay, note also this important conclusion, which we will return to shortly. Quote, the Gaza Health Ministry death toll is significantly higher than other estimates and displays an unusually high killed to injured ratio that appears out of proportion with the damage visible on the site, close quote. The eyewitnesses So this is reason number 2. Okay, so there's the precedent is reason number 2. The eyewitnesses. The first casualty of war is truth, of course. It is hard, if not impossible, to determine the truth on a battlefield. That is the case of the Israel-Hamas war, too. Neither side has permitted any truly independent body or media organization to enter the war zone. That has led to multiple governments and media organizations simply taking Hamas-controlled Gaza Health Ministry at its word. Is it a good idea to accept the word of an organization whose master carried out the massacre of October 7th in the first place? It's a rhetorical question. Yeah, no kidding. The statistics. Abraham John Weiner is a professor of statistics and data science at the University of Pennsylvania. Last week, he published an important analysis of the Gaza Health Ministry's numbers in the magazine Tablet. Weiner carefully reviewed the Gaza Ministry's death toll claims and concluded, quote, the numbers are not real. That much is obvious to anyone who understands how naturally occurring numbers work. The casualties are not overwhelmingly women and children, and the majority may be Hamas fighters, close quote. This is the same guy that I was showing. He's the one who showed the linear line. You can just graph out the numbers that Hamas is reporting, and you can see that it forms a straight line. And it's just like, no, the casualties don't go like that. Okay, so he's saying the casualties are not overwhelmingly women and children. The majority may be Hamas fighters, close quote. Why? Weiner took a look at the total number of Gaza deaths from the start of the war on October 27th to now. On a graph, the number grows by the same amount every single day, showing a perfect line going upward. Weiner says, quote, this is regularity is almost surely not real. One would expect quite a bit of variation day to day. The Gaza Ministry is releasing fake daily numbers that vary too little. Yes, exactly. There's going to be a lot of variance from one day to the next. So, and here he's showing at least 20,000 reportedly killed. Cumulative daily reports of Gaza in Gaza 7 October 20 to 20 December. All deaths. So here's the all deaths line, and the pink is represented as women and children. So they're saying, like, this is the overwhelming majority of the deaths are women and children. That seems highly unlikely. It never works like that. And they're trying, Hamas is trying to maximize the deaths of women and children so they can use their bodies for propaganda purposes. And here he's even got a truce highlighted right around the end of November there. There was a brief pause, but the numbers keep going up at the same rate. Okay, back to the article. The mistakes. The Gaza Health Ministry appears to have another error that calls into question much of what they've claimed. The ceasefire. Remember, there was a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas from November 24th to November 30th, a week essentially in which hostages were released, humanitarian aid was received, and the fighting stopped. In that week, two strong critics of Israel, the United Nations and Al Jazeera, said 2 Palestinians were shot and killed. But the Gaza Health Ministry published data claiming that casualties continued to grow at an alarming pace during the ceasefire week. The ministry claimed deaths had topped 15,000 during the truce period and even said that most of them were women and children. How can that be? Who was killed and where? Was the November ceasefire faked? The fake here is just about anything said by the Gaza Health Ministry. And tragically, this week, many of our members of parliament took them at their word. Yes, that is exactly what is happening. We are bolstering their propaganda because our politicians, on the progressive side anyway, have bought it hook, line, and sinker. Because Hamas is part of the global progressive movement, just like I'm always pointing to what's her name there, Judith Butler, who is a seminal author in the third wave feminist movement. And progressive more broadly, the progressive movement, which is just progressively communist, by the way. That's the only thing they ever really show any progress toward. Okay. Here I gotta line up my next tab here, guys. Oh, that's not it. But I am going to shut this sucker down because it's a bit of a disaster when my guest doesn't show up. But that's okay. It's all part and parcel with the with doing live shows. And I had a bunch of stuff lined up here for William. You should check out his Substack, Dr. William Makis. He has been doing he's been cataloging a lot of the deaths and stuff like this. He's got an entire database now. He's been paying particular attention to the deaths in the civilian doctor population in Canada. Like, it's just incredible, the amount of what we're seeing, the amount of people who are dying in Canada, especially doctors, and that's going to leave us much worse off in the very near future, I think. And we haven't even seen the full scale of it, so I'll just give William another plug. I have his Substack up on the ticker here at the bottom. He is one prolific writer. He's been completely ensconced in this since day one. I was really interested to hear his awakening story. Actually, he was great at the International Crisis Summit there, where I saw him speak. He was a pretty powerful speaker. So I'll look forward to speaking to him at a future date. Okay, guys, that brings us all the way up to the Veterans for Freedom website. Go to veteransforfreedom.ca. You can subscribe to our newsletter by hitting subscribe here. Join Veterans for Freedom if you're a veteran by clicking join here, and support Veterans for Freedom by clicking support here. You'll have two options. You can donate to us directly to help with our operational costs, or you can donate to the support fund. Everybody who donates to the support fund gets the option to vote on where the donations go at the end of every month. We have our candidates up for this month. Carrie Sakamoto is first up, and she says, I am reaching out to you in a time of great need. I thought I was doing the right thing, what my government asked me to do. They said it was safe and effective. It was anything but that for me. After my second shot, I almost died. I was in the hospital for 17 days, unable to feed myself, see properly, talk, walk, hear, or concentrate. I had to learn these things before I could leave hospital care. My health problems have just continued after that. I've been experiencing severe neurological issues, including full-blown Bell's palsy, depression, and anxiety as a result of my COVID-19 vaccine. I have been fighting tirelessly to seek justice for the harm caused through the Vaccine Injury Support Program. I have been able to validate my vaccine injury, but I am still waiting to be paid back for medical treatment I needed, including a hearing aid and glasses. So we're going to be raising funds for Carrie's Give, Send, Go there. I had her on the program not too long ago. Chris Lysak is back up again. As everybody is aware, Chris Lysak was kind of the face of the Coots 4, really. And he was recently released. He's got all kinds of bills, of course, legal bills piling up. And even if it just goes to helping his family, I think that is an excellent cause. Lisa Robinson, Heartless Pickering city councilor, who was defamed and booted out of council and sanctioned 90 days wages, and she's a single mom, so that really hurts. And all she's doing is sticking up for her constituents like she ought to. So that's another one of our candidates that's up for this month. So 3 great candidates. We got Carrie Sakamoto, Chris Lysak, and Lisa Robinson. And you'll also have the option to send 10% of your donation to Quilts of Valor Canada. Quilts of Valor, I mean, they're very well known in the veteran community at this point. I have one because I'm an Afghan vet, but Quilts of Valor, they make these wonderful quilts for veterans, and they're very much appreciated. They're really good quilts too. So you can donate to the support fund by clicking on one of these buttons here to get a monthly subscription from your credit card. If you don't want to use your credit card, then please send your e-transfer to fund@veteransforfreedom.ca, preferably with the auto deposit enabled. But if you're not able to do that, please use the password fund for freedom. That's all caps fund, number 4, all caps freedom. And we'll make sure that gets off to a worthy cause. All right, that brings us all the way back to Ayn Rand, who says, there is no difference between communism and socialism except in the means of achieving the same ultimate end. Communism proposes to enslave men by force, socialism by vote. It is merely the difference between murder and suicide. And we are in the process of a slow suicide here in the West right now. But it's a fourth turning. It's a crisis era. It has a beginning and an end. Once we get those greasy boomers out of the way and competent, decent generation back in charge, then we can usher in the next era of the Enlightenment, the next stage of the Enlightenment. But we do have the potential to fall to tyranny every time we go into one of these generational demographic crises. So I'm going to go ahead and throw to a few comments before I sign off. Again, guys, I'm sorry. Like, William must have he said he got tied up or something. He didn't make it. So the title is a little bit misleading, but I was able to cover off the time, I think, fairly well. There's always plenty to talk about out there. Darlene is saying here in Newfoundland, we have deceased in refrigeration containers whom loved ones cannot afford to bury. I saw that story. That is just so tragic. The Newfoundlanders, they can't even afford, like, the economic devastation in the country, plus the devastation to our health. It's it's unrestricted warfare that's being inflicted on us here. And so there are Newfoundlanders who can't even afford to bury their loved ones, and they're just staying in freezers, and it's sad. Patricia is saying, have a good day, everyone. Great show, Jeff, as always. Thanks very much. Darlene says, great live, Jeff. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Same to you, and thank you. Cindy is saying, thanks, Jeff. Hearts. Hoping you can reschedule with Dr. Makis soon. Hashtag winning, and she's giving us the victory. Right on, yeah. Hopefully, I can get him in here. Thank you, Jeff. That's Holly says, thank you, Jeff. And Thomas says, thanks for the great show and information, Jeff. Yeah, it's my pleasure, guys. I'm glad you enjoyed it, because I was just kind of flying at the seat of my pants here, but it's all good. And In It for Love over on Rumble says, Ayn Rand and giving us the trophy. Ayn Rand is a freaking boss, man. She's a boss lady. I love her writing. So if you ever get a chance, check her out. Very insightful, I think. And she's describing a lot of the same social trends that I think we're seeing right now, right down to the weaselly, sniveling bureaucrats. I can remember, reading that book for the first time, and I was like, it's a little bit over the top, but man, can I ever see that culture in the bureaucracy in Canada. And Sergeant Schultz is saying, at least the bikers have the right attitude. Well, at least somebody does. And okay, guys, that's it for me today. Thanks very much for tuning in and staying with me. And until the next time, stay frosty and stay safe.
Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever have. Redemption songs.